Welcome, dear students, to the second unit on molecular bioendocrinology. So, in this unit, we'll be talking about two different hormonal or endocrine glands and their hormones. So, it is the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So, we'll start with the hypothalamus. So, these are the different hormones that are produced by the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus, as you might already know, is located just below the thalamus, and it's a very small almond-sized organ, and it has three regions: the anterior, tuberal, and posterior regions. So here you can see the anterior region in this color, that is this region is the anterior region. This is the tuberal region, and this is the lateral region, lateral posterior region. So the anterior region contains 7 nuclei, tuberal region contains 4, and lateral region contains 4 different nuclei, right? So the nucleus is nothing but a group of cells which has a specific or differentiated function other than the other cells, so cells that are nearby, right? So these each of these nucleus have a particular type of cell present, and these cells have a particular function to them. Even though it's a very small organ, the organ is very important in controlling. Uh, uh, you cannot even actually call it an organ; it's an endocrine gland. So it controls most of the important functions of your body, and this is the different functions that you can see. Like just take the highlighter. So this is the anterior portion, the lateral portion, the tuberal portion, and the posterior portion. So you can see that in the posterior portion itself, it is important for the relay of signals to and from the other nuclei, and it is also important for memory. Whereas in the tuberal region is important for your behavioral responses to emotions and the circadian rhythms that you have. So it's also important for satiety and for neuroendocrine control. The lateral region is important for thirst and hunger, and the anterior region uh, affects or secretes oxytocin, ADH, important for heat responses, cold responses, also secretes oxytocin, ADH, and it's also important for circadian rhythms, right? So these are the major functions of your body which is actually controlled by the hypothalamus. So we'll consider the regions of hypothalamus and the name of the nucleus and the endocrine function. So the anterior region has 4 different nucleus, not 4, actually 3 different nucleus, and you have the medial preoptic nucleus, the supraoptic nucleus, and the paraventricular nucleus. So the medial preoptic nucleus regulates the release of gonadotropic hormones from the adenohypophysis. Supraoptic nucleus is important for a release of vasopressin and oxytocin. Paraventricular nucleus is important for thyrotropin releasing hormone, corticotropin releasing hormone, oxytocin, vasopressin, and somatostatin release. The tuberal region has the arcuate nucleus, which is important for growth hormone releasing hormone. It's not important for the growth hormone, it is important for the growth hormone releasing hormone. So the posterior nucleus has the posterior region has the posterior nucleus, and that is important for vasopressin release. So these are the different functions of these so-called hormones that are released. So ADH hormone regulates the water level. Corticotropin releasing hormone is important for the physical and emotional response of the body, and also for your anxiety and appetite. Gonadotropin releasing hormone is important for your to maintain your reproductive system and for your sexual maturation. And the growth hormone releasing hormone, as you know, it's important for your growth. Actually, it is important for the release of growth hormone, which is important for your growth. So it's important in children as well as for the metabolism in adults. So oxytocin is important. It has a major function in the childbirth and lactation in women. And other than that, it also controls some of the human behavior, including the mother-infant bonding. And somatostatin is important for in the central nervous system, and it also inhibits other hormones. The thyrotropin releasing hormone stimulates the production of thyroid hormone, which plays important role in body's metabolism. So the hypothalamic function regulates blood pressure, rate and force of heartbeat, digestive tract motility, rate and depth of breathing, and many other visceral activities. It is also involved in the perception of pleasure, fear, and rage, controls mechanisms for maintaining normal body temperature, and also controls your feelings of hunger and satiety, and also regulates your sleep and the sleep cycle. So the control of hypothalamic function is important for several factors, and it is controlled by internal hormonal signals and neural input from other sources. So the final common pathway for signals to reach the pituitary. So it's the hypothalamus that is actually affecting the pituitary also, and it's also involved in non-endocrine functions like food intake and feedback mechanisms are working in conjunction with pituitary. If it inhibits the hypothalamus, it has an effect on the pituitary. If it inhibits the pituitary, it has an effect on the hypothalamus. So there are short, long loops or even auto feedback mechanisms involved. And then you have the rhythmic secretion of hormones and activity, like based on the circadian rhythms. So the suprachiasmatic nuclei is important as it works just like a clock in your body and helps in maintaining the circadian rhythm. So this is the feedback loop. I had a few doubts from the last class itself regarding the feedback loop. That is, you have short loops and long loops. It can be a long loop, it can be very long loop, or it can be very short loop. Only thing is that you have to remember is feedback is something that you get after the program. Like you're attending molecular endocrinology classes, and by the end of the semester you will be given a feedback form where you have to identify the positives and the negatives of the whole semester in this regarding this particular program that you've taken. At the same time, when you're considering feedback inhibition for hormones, like you have, it can be for hormones or for any pathway. We'll just consider a general pathway like A gives B, B gives C, C gives D. So feedback inhibition is where formation of D inhibits A. It can be a direct inhibition from D to A. So then it's called a long loop. If it is inhibition from B to A, then it's a very short loop. If it is an inhibition from C, C inhibits consider it's an inhibition from D. D inhibits C, C inhibits B, B inhibits A. So that is what a longer loop that is happening. But each step is a short loop, right? So that is what you mean by feedback inhibition. And auto inhibition is where I am producing a hormone in my body and I am inhibiting the production of the hormone by myself. So, like consider like A is a endocrine organ. A is producing X as the hormone from it, and the production of X from A inhibits A from producing more X. So that is auto inhibition. So it's all these are like fine tuning methods to regulate the production of hormones in your system in your body. So as the figure can you can see over here, you have the higher central nervous system centers, and then you have the hypothalamus, then you have the pituitary gland, and finally you have the target tissue. So the higher CNS centers releases neurohormones, hypothalamus releases hypophysiotropic hormones, pituitary gland releases hypophyseal hormones, which ultimately goes to target tissues. So the target tissues will result in a production of hormones or a response to a hormone which will produce or inhibition of the organs that come just before it. Like if the hypophyseal hormones synthesized by the pituitary gland inhibit the pituitary gland itself, it's called autoinhibition. If the hypophyseal hormones inhibit the hypothalamus, it's a short loop feedback system. And consider your target tissue is inhibiting the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, and the higher central nervous system. So that becomes a long loop. So that is it's just the distance of how longer the feedback inhibition takes place. So the hypothalamus pituitary association is a very important factor. You cannot consider hypothalamus as an isolated entity. It is part of the pituitary also. Like if you inhibit the hypothalamus, the pituitary will also have to be inhibited. If you activate the hypothalamus, the pituitary will also be activated. So it's an association. There is an association with the hypothalamus and the pituitary. Even in this figure, you can see that the hypothalamus produces releasing hormones. The hypothalamus produces releasing hormones which activate the pituitary, and the pituitary produces different hormones like ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, FSH, LH is follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. So these hormones then act on the target organs, example adrenal cortex, ovary, testis, thyroid gland, etc. So it acts on the target organs, which in effect produces a hormone, which then finally goes to target tissues, affects the target tissues. So there is a feedback inhibition from thyroxine, the hormone that is produced from thyroid, which inhibits the pituitary, the hypothalamus, and the higher brain centers. So the smaller the length of the loop, it becomes a short loop. The longer the length of the loop, it becomes a long loop. So similar inhibition you can see in all of the cases. So this is another complex negative feedback. Like the hormone that is produced from hypothalamus inhibits itself. So that is called as autoinhibition. And this is also another example of autoinhibition. It can also be called a ultra short loop of inhibition. It's usually called autoinhibition. And like the anterior pituitary is the hormone produced from anterior pituitary is inhibiting the hypothalamus, then that becomes a short loop. So this becomes a short loop. So consider the anterior like GnRH is synthesized from the hypothalamus, activates pituitary, LH is released, LH activates testis, testis acts on the target tissue. So the testis then finally releases testosterone. The testosterone inhibits both the anterior pituitary and the hypothalamus. So it becomes a long loop also. So this is not a system where there is any particular order, and you cannot say that like one will inhibit two first and then three will inhibit four. So there is no order to it. It depends as and when it happens on your body and according to the conditions that are there in your body.